Moving on to item number 13. Welcome. Thank you, guys. Sorry to keep you waiting for so long. And I think, Dave, you're going to lead off. I'll just hand straight to you.
Tēnā koutou. So here this afternoon to have a chat to you about the Sport and Recreation Facilities Investment Fund and bring you the guidelines for the implementation of this fund. So this is a little bit of a graphic to try and illustrate the space that we're in. So at the top there you've got the Auckland Sport and Recreation Strategic Action Plan, which sets the strategic outcomes in the space, and that links into the Auckland Plan. So it's a key strategic document and one that guides strongly into this area. Walking through this graphic, at the next layer down, you've got prioritisation. So the Sport Investment Plan, so this is a piece of policy that came to you last month and was adopted, which sets the clear criteria in terms of where Council will invest into, and it links strongly with the Auckland Sports Sector Facilities Priorities Plan. The next layer down again is investment. So this is what we're really talking about today, which is the Auckland, the Sport and Recreation Investment Fund, and it links into the external partners. So we're looking to leverage this fund with external funding to be able to grow and maximise the impact of it. And I guess the final area there is the process, which is around facility partnerships, and which is key in terms of being able to create that leverage partnership and work with the sports sector to be able to realise their outcomes that they're wanting to achieve. So a little bit of background, and this hopefully is still familiar with you because it was adopted just last month, but I appreciate that was a very long meeting for you. So it sets the framework for the investment into sport over the next 20 years and targets investment into three key areas: low participant communities, emerging sports with high growth potential, and high participation sports. And it uses 4 investment principles of equity, outcome focus, financial sustainability and accountability. So this really focuses the investment into sport and recreation facilities, and I guess serves as a mechanism to be able to achieve the KPIs that are listed within that plan. In terms of the fund itself, so this financial year we've got $7 million to allocate, another $7 million next year, and then it grows into future years, sort of starting off with in excess of $13 million and growing in an incremental manner from that into the outer years of the LTP. As the name of the fund suggests, it's a regional fund for I guess relatively large facilities, sub-regional or regional facilities, and facilities that are largely in excess of 500k, but probably significantly more than that. This slide is really the crux of the process that we're talking about today. So there's 2 points that we're proposing that will be able to come back to this committee for investment decisions, and are marked in the sort of red outlines there. The first being decisions around investment into business cases or feasibility studies. And the reason we're proposing investing into that area is we've seen from sport facility developments across the region that this is a bit of a bottleneck. It's an area where a lot of projects stall out, and that's because not many funders invest into this area. So it's really only a few funders, and this would really assist in helping projects flow through the process. The second point where projects would come back to this committee for investment is around the substantive investment into the capital development, that build cost. So walking through this process, stage 1 is a pretty simple one-page canvas, we're calling it, that sort of outlines what the project's all about and helps the community group tell the story about what they're trying to achieve, and the fact that they've done some homework, they've lined up the needs analysis, they've got some thought about the scope and scale and what outcomes it will achieve to complement any sort of investment into it. If that all sounds good, we would recommend that it flows into stage 2, which is a proposal template, so a template that we've created, which sort of really starts to flesh out and ask some key questions about the project. This template is strongly aligned with the Auckland Sports Sector Facilities Priorities Plan, which is the document that's owned by the sports sector. So it's using the work that the sports sector's done and mirroring it back into our council processes, where there's a little bit of alignment that needs to be done there, but we're working through that process at the moment. That then is the catalyst for potentially that first investment decision around the feasibility and business case. So that's when we'd really start to be able to identify the details of what a proposal would look like. It's important to note that at that stage, the level of detail required for any particular feasibility or business case required will really be dependent on the size and scale of the project. So it'll be a relative process in terms of what sort of detail we're looking for at that point. If that business case holds water, it looks like it's a good proposal and it's going to deliver really good outcomes for Aucklanders, then we'd have the mechanism to come back to this committee at that final decision-making point for the substantive investment into the capital development costs. In terms of the next steps, the intent is to share the final guidelines with the local boards, finalise any templates like those, the canvas and the proposal template that we were speaking about earlier, ready to roll out for a contestable process in this financial year. So those would need to be communicated to the sector and the process around what the timelines look like. Then we would seek to come back to this committee in March of 2020 for the allocation of this year's investment. So that's the process, I guess, and happy to take any questions.
Awesome. That's really clear. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions? Councillor Cooper.
It's not a question. It's just really appreciated you keeping us up to date with the different projects and where they're at. It's been really good to know, because we don't get reports back like the local board do, so it's actually really good to know as a local councillor what's happening. Thank you.
Right. You happy to move that, Councillor Cooper? Second, Councillor Simpson. I mean, we have kind of worked our way through. Just one point that I think is really important and worth noting, some of the feedback that we've had, and I think it was Angela Dalton raised it with us, was the scale of the project being looked at is not always, or the complexity of the process is not always commensurate with the scale of the project. So we've looked at scalability, smaller projects, much simpler process, and I really thank you for that. Okay, right. Been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Good work, guys. Thank you. Item number 14 and Mace. Open space and Paul. This is, I hope people actually have a look at this, and I will be very blunt. There's an awful lot of twaddle being spoken about out there, saying that we are doing nothing but selling open space. Please watch the presentation carefully. Over to you. Mace, Paul, thank you.
Kia ora tātou. So I just wanted to really just talk you through the 13 new parks that were acquired in the last financial year across Auckland. These total 29.1 hectares and they cover 6 local board areas. In the presentation it shows you the distribution of those across Auckland. In addition to those 13 new parks, we also purchased land at 202, 208 West Coast Road. That is for a future civic space which is part of the One Local Board initiative for the Waitakere Ranges Local Board. Just a very quick breakdown in terms of the different park typologies. So the majority of those are neighbourhood parks. We have one suburb park in Henderson Massey, and then there were acquisition of 2 land parcels which will help us form a new sports park in Whenuapai. In addition to that, I mentioned the civic space, and there's also an access way up in Rodney that was acquired, which links into Esplanade Reserve that supports a new development, which will be really well utilised by the community and will actually provide them access to the township without having to cross a very busy piece of road up there. So it's a good way of connecting a community to community assets and the places where people want to be, and providing the mechanism for people to walk and cycle and move around their community without having to rely upon their cars. If we make some comparisons to the non-service park disposal, so this is data that was provided by Panuku, there were 6 disposals in the last financial year. They represent 1.63% of the total land acquired, so 29 hectares versus a very small amount of land. When we talk about non-service park disposals, it's really hard to get a sense about what they might be until you look at a picture. So this is the recreation reserve in Otara Papatoetoe, which was largely used by the surrounding commercial premises for overflow parking. As you can see, there are no park furniture on there. That doesn't meet council's policy provisions. We wouldn't have a park surrounded by a road. It's extremely dangerous for people that are using the park. So it might be a park in terms of it had a zoning of recreation reserve. It doesn't function as open space, and it doesn't accord with council policy. So the value of those 6 disposals was $2.345 million that went back into the consolidated account that can be used towards other community assets and facilities. If I give you a sense in terms of open space land that we're looking to acquire in this financial year, just started, a number of neighbourhood parks, another suburb park in Upper Harbour. We will look to complete acquisitions that will allow us to deliver that sports park. In Whenuapai, looking at a civic space, negotiations are progressing quite well in Mangakiki Tamaki, and we're also moving quickly forward towards the hopeful acquisition of a destination park up in Rodney. So we'd expect our budget for this current financial year is $47 million. We would expect we'd be delivering another 13 to 15 new parks and open space for Aucklanders in response to growth that's occurring across the region. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Councillor Clough.
Paul, I noticed that there's basically 28 million spent in Albany and 20 million in the rest of Auckland. Is there a rationale for that?
So through the chair, so these are largely, there's a number of acquisitions that were in Upper Harbour. So we're responding really to growth in Hobsonville Point in particular. So there were 2 acquisitions there, and we're also starting to acquire land against the approved structure plan for Whenuapai. So council is, with respect to the provision of open space in Whenuapai, where development is quite slow to take place, we're actually getting ahead of the curve in terms of the acquisition of open space in those areas.
It was a bit of a leading question because it's just the Upper Harbour Board with the right intentions, always wanting to optimise and have money ring fenced in the area. But I'm noticing that's quite an investment. That's all.
Like to move and second these? Okay. All good. Any other questions? I think it is really, really important that people do take note of this, and my understanding is this doesn't include, and we will hope to include at some stage, all the land that's actually coming to us by way of subdivisions and growth and other development. This is just the raw information on what new parkland we've got. It also doesn't include, I don't think, some of the other pieces that are under negotiation from the regional park side of things. So again, just restating, we are not selling land hand over fist. We are getting a huge number of new parks, and we've got rid of small inappropriate pieces of land that can be used for other things. Councillor Filipaina?
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to take up on the point that you made in the opening remarks around what work they are doing and how some of the people who have around this table and our public have been spreading, obviously, facts that are not facts. And I'm just trying to think, Chair, whether it'll be good to send something through to all the councillors in regards to the work that our team are doing around open space. I just think that for those that some of them are here, that would have loved to have got this, and I'm just trying to find a way to get it to them.
Well, why don't we pick up on the point we're going to be working on a series of communication initiatives to highlight the new parks. We'll make sure that we send whatever's produced to all councillors so that there's clarity rather than confusion about this. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, team. I'm happy to move the summary of information. Second, Councillor Filipaina. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And just noting, we will pick up the questions that were raised by our presenters at the beginning of the meeting and make sure they're included in any of the 5G info that we get following this meeting. And I'm happy to move the exclusion of public for the reasons set out. Seconded, Councillor Cooper. All those in favour, please say aye.